Welcome back to the Crash Course Podcast. My name is Craig Crash Collins, joined alongside by Brandon Scott, otherwise known as B Scott. We've got a lot to talk to you guys about tonight. We're going to talk about the Colts and their Week 5 game against the Browns. We're going to talk about the end of the NBA season, talk a little bit about the finals and the postseason and how the bubble went. We're also going to get into some interesting, thoughts and discussion about the Pacers offseason. I know we already did it kind of a podcast earlier, but some new things have happened. Nate McMillan obviously no longer with the Pacers. What's Victor Oladipo's future look like? So we've got a lot going on. B Scott, first of all, how you doing tonight, B Scott?
Hey, I'm good. And you know what? Last time you had an off season for the Pacers, like a look into the off season, I wasn't around. So
Exactly.
now I get to give my 2 cents on what I think is going to be a crazy off season for the Pacers.
First, let's go ahead, though, and hop right into kind of a quick recap of the Colts and the Browns from yesterday. The Colts at the Browns on Sunday, Week 5. Browns win 32-23. The Browns did have a 17-point second quarter that led Cleveland to a 20-10 lead at the half. Phillip Rivers throws a pick six early in the third, but then Isaiah Rodgers quickly returns the favor and runs the kickoff back 101 yards for a touchdown, so no harm, no foul. The Colts were still in it, 27-20. That's what they trailed the Browns heading into the fourth quarter. The Colts do commit an end zone in the The Colts do commit a penalty in the end zone for a safety that gives the Browns a 9-point lead. That's where it stayed the rest of the day. The two teams traded field goals the rest of the way, but that pretty much did it in for the Colts. As far as stats go, Phillip Rivers went 21 for 33 for 243 yards and 2 interceptions. T.Y. Hilton, I mean, obviously not a game that we're used to seeing him have as far as like being a great game, but at the same time, it was a kind of solid performance by him. 6 catches, 69 yards.
Best game of the season for him.
Yeah, I mean it's at least a start for him. And then 68 yards rushing for the Colts. Jonathan Taylor had 12 carries for 57 yards and a touchdown. Now, of course, it should be noted that Darius Leonard was out for this game, and the defense though still played well. But I think if you're a Colts fan, you have a right to be disappointed. I'm disappointed as well. But I'm not really that surprised. The defense wasn't awful, but they definitely did miss Darius Leonard. It would have been nice to obviously have him. Baker Mayfield did go 21 for 37 for 247 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 picks. Now, Baker Mayfield, easily the best quarterback that the Colts have faced all season, and had a performance that embodied that. And then, of course, Baker's got better weapons around him. As far than the Colts have faced this season. I mean, Nick Foles had Allen Robinson. That's about it. Kirk Cousins had Adam Thielen. That's about it. So this is the first team that the Colts have faced with a legitimate, tangible, good offense. And they, I don't want to say they failed the test because I don't really want to go that harsh with it, but I'm definitely disappointed. We'll see how the Colts bounce back from this, but definitely the offense is still the gigantic liability heading into Week 6.
They better bounce back from this. They play the Bengals next week. So, I was disappointed as well, and not surprised at the same time. But, the defense, you said the defense wasn't awful. You know what? The defense actually played really, really, really well. Yeah, the first half was something you don't really want to think about too much. They gave up 20 points in the first half. But I think in the first half, it was really just kind of they were truly missing Darius Leonard. They missed that leader for them on the field on the defensive side of things. Because in the second half, they came out and they played lights out. They played really good shutdown defense. I mean, think about it. Majority of the points that were given up were the Cleveland Browns defense was scoring those, whether it been the pick six or the safety. I mean, right there, that was 9 points right there. Now 9 points, and then otherwise
that's the difference in the game.
the defense gave up a field goal. the entire second half. They forced Baker Mayfield to go 2 for 19 in the second half. That defense played lights out. I mean, look at Baker Mayfield's stats still, 21 of 37. Only 2 of those completions came in the second half. 247 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 INTs. I mean, still, this Colts defense are a bunch of ball hawks. They are forcing turnovers when they need to. I mean, the defense is still playing lights out. And they held Cleveland to season lows in yards, in scoring. I mean, Cleveland on average scores about, I think I read it's about 39 points per game. And the Colts defense technically held them to like 20. I'm not good at math, folks. So
it's that bold statement.
Points, 24 points. I mean, that's really good. This defense is really good. On the flip side, the offense is bad. However, missing Anthony Costanzo, that is a bigger deal than most people think. In Anthony Costanzo's absence, any game that he has not played in, including this past weekend, the Colts are now 2-18. That is a lot. I mean, that is a player that you're truly missing. I feel like maybe some of the interceptions come from forced passes that may have been caused by Myles Garrett, rushing the passer. And then the low yard total in the rushing game. You don't have Anthony Costanzo there. I think we don't realize how good Anthony Costanzo is until he's not there. You look at that offensive line and you go, that offensive line is anchored around Quentin Nelson. It is, but Anthony Costanzo is, I feel like he's like one of the stronger keys to that offensive line. Without him, it's just not as good. Let's be honest, it's still really good, but it's just not as good. So there was just a lot of key factors into this game that were kind of stacked up against the Colts. Having 2 of your better players, one of them being your defensive captain, basically your team leader, out. Those are going to be hard things to overcome. The defense still played very, very well and is still ranked as one of the top defenses in the NFL, even without Darius Leonard this past week. And they played one of the better offensive teams in the NFL. But I'm still very, very concerned about this offense, Anthony Costanzo or not. I mean, the passing game, it's just not there. So have only scored 2 offensive touchdowns in your last 22 possessions. That's not going to get it done. You cannot expect your defense and your special teams to outscore teams every single week. You just can't. And this offense needs to figure it out. And then the biggest thing that's concerning to me is that in the post-game press conference, when Frank Reich, who I still think is a really good coach, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to sit here and bash Frank Reich at all. I think he is one of the most underrated coaches in the NFL as far as play calling goes. But this quote had me scratching my head, a little perplexed. When asked about Phillip Rivers' play, to sum up the quote, he's not concerned about the quarterback play right now. I'm not concerned about it at all. What? I mean, yes, it's one game. It's one game. But just take away the interceptions and, the bad passes, whatever. I'm still concerned because the offense has failed to put the ball in the end zone on a consistent basis. I mean, thank goodness for Rodrigo Blankenship. This offense, it can move between the 20s. I will say that. It can move between the 20s, but it cannot punch it in the end zone to save its life. And that is what's really concerning. That's going to be the biggest obstacle for them to overcome going down the stretch in the season. Because the defense is going to have some injuries. We're seeing that right now. And it's going to have some games where it doesn't play lights out. And that happens. That's just what happens over the stretch of an NFL season. So the offense is going to be required to win a few games. I mean, heck, when we get to the playoffs, if everything keeps going the way it is, the Colts will make the playoffs. So nobody sound the alarm. This isn't like last year. This defense is for real. So that's also probably one of the disappointing things too, is that if this team this team's not going to make any noise in the playoffs because the offense is bad, the defense is going to win us enough games that they're not going to have a very good draft pick and they're going to miss out on some of the top tier quarterbacks. So that could be one of the biggest downfalls to the entire season. Yes, I guess I'm looking big picture here. But they may figure it out. They may right the ship. I hope they do. I'm optimistic still. It's one game. The Colts don't play very well on the road to begin with, and it was at Cleveland. And I know, it was the Cleveland Browns. Well, no, the Cleveland Browns are actually good this year.
Yeah.
They've actually figured it out finally, and it was Cleveland's week. I think they are going to figure it out. They have some good timing with the Bengals coming to town next week. If I'm the Colts, I'm having my scouts all over that stadium watching AJ Green. And if I'm Chris Ballard, I may be trying to have a conversation with the GM of the Cincinnati Bengals and seeing what kind of deal we can put together to get AJ Green into a Colts uniform, because that is one of the things the Colts are missing right now is a big target at wide receiver. With Michael Pittman out and Desmond Patman out and just uncertain play at tight end, that's what they're missing. They need some help there.
Now, would you? Well, I mean, if this were a couple of years ago, I'd be right there with you with AJ Green. But the only thing that worries me is I don't know if it's now. Granted, I mean, I don't know. It's a weird situation with AJ Green because on the one hand, you think like, is he starting to kind of lose it a little bit as far as like not being the player that he once was, and he's definitely on the back end. He's past his prime a little bit, but not as in
he's
31.
He's
But
31.
I mean, he caught 0 passes, and he looked lost at times out there against the Ravens. And if you can't, I mean, this is the year to be excited. I mean, they finally got a franchise. What they believe, what the Bengals believe is going to be kind of a once in a lifetime type guy in Joe Burrow. They got they should be super hyped. He should be super hyped to have a new quarterback, and yet he's not played really all that well. And there's
look at it this way. He is past his prime. Okay. Yeah. He's it. There is not many options there, so defenses can really key up on him. If you bring him in just to be another weapon alongside T.Y. Hilton, AJ Green, I would feel like is an upgrade over Ashton Doolin.
Oh, I mean, to be fair, yeah, I mean that's a fair point.
I don't need him to go back to his Pro Bowl caliber days.
Right.
What the Colts need is somebody serviceable that can actually help stretch the field. I mean, because right now, what the Colts are lacking, they know T.Y. is a deep threat. T.Y. is a deep threat. But there's just not much reliable underneath for defenses to respect other than the run game, and even that is not great right now. I mean, the Colts offense ranks 22nd in the NFL, 22nd. And the run game is I mean, it's just nothing is terrifying to defenses when they look at it. And that's huge. I feel like if you just I don't know. It may not help anything. It might, because right now, other than T.Y. Hilton, you're running out there a bunch of wide receivers that have hardly any experience. At least AJ Green's got experience,
right?
And like I said, I'm not looking for the Pro Bowl level from AJ Green. What the Colts need is just serviceable, something to help in the passing game, somebody that will fight for a ball. And maybe AJ Green says he wants out. I mean, think about how many coaches has AJ Green had,
right?
Or at least offensive coordinators. I mean, and then different quarterbacks. I mean, it's just maybe
at the
same time working with a rookie quarterback isn't all for a wide receiver that's 31 years old isn't always the most ideal situation. So maybe putting him with a guy like Phillip Rivers, where it may help his game a little bit more. I don't know, but I mean, that's one of the options out there, and I feel like the AJ Green route, an option like that, may cost you a 5th round pick,
right?
And there's a lot of upside there. I don't know how many years are left on his contract or what his contract looks like, but I mean,
now I will say this. Now, and it could be true. I mean, because on the one hand, on the pro side of AJ Green, you have the reason he's not playing as well as he once was is because he wants out. He wants a change of scenery, and the Colts can provide that. But on the other side, you have does he want out because he's not playing as well? He's not getting targeted as much, all that kind of thing. So you kind of have those two sides of the spectrum. But when you said the Colts need somebody underneath to take the pressure off of Hilton, my mind initially went, hear me out on this. My mind initially went to Julian Edelman. The Patriots aren't going to move off him. So my then thought went to Danny Amendola from the Lions. Could you maybe get a Danny Amendola who might be a little bit cheaper on a Lions team that really is kind of doesn't really have a direction right now as a franchise. On the one hand, they've got Matthew Stafford, so they feel like they've got a decent quarterback in place to maybe do something, but then the talent around him hasn't really gelled. So maybe do you punt on bringing in Danny Amendola and trade him to the Colts? The Colts can maybe give you a couple of decent players or some picks. I think that could be an investment that might be a little bit safer, might be a little bit more up Chris Ballard's alley than maybe an AJ Green.
Yeah, I mean, I guess saying that needing that option underneath is the wrong thing, because AJ Green's not that underneath option either. He's a field stretcher. But when I look at AJ Green, he is more along the line of the type of wide receiver that Phillip Rivers has had a lot of success with. That taller wide receiver.
Like Vincent Jackson and those kind
of guys.
But
Mike
remember,
just look at all the success that he has had with 6'2" and taller wide receivers when he was with the Chargers.
Yeah, so Phillip Rivers was super great when all he had to do was just throw the ball up in the air and a super tall guy could go grab it because he's taller than everyone else.
Right. Essentially, that's what AJ Green would bring.
Right.
And I mean, obviously, I'm surprised that the tight end position hasn't. I mean, obviously, Mo Alley Cox had one bad game, so I can't say it's been shaky. But Phillip Rivers has worked with some really good tight ends.
Right.
I mean,
Antonio
Gates. So
I know he's not a tight end, but Wes Welker was on the Chargers, wasn't he? Was he a Charger at one point? I know he was on the Dolphins for a while.
He was wasn't he a Bronco?
He was a Bronco, but he was a Patriot before that. But before that, I thought he was either on the Charger. I knew he was on the Dolphins, but I can't remember if he was on the Chargers in between the Dolphins and the Patriots. I
think he was always with the Dolphins.
Here, I'm gonna look it up while you continue with your point.
But there just needs to be something. I know everybody's gonna sit there and say, "Well, why trade for a wide receiver? We need to trade for a quarterback." How?
Right.
How? Who is going to, okay, who's giving up their quarterback, and what's the cost going to be? I mean, right now, I honestly believe the NFL is not deep at all at the quarterback position. There's not a guy that's just kind of floating out there. And before anybody says it, Colin Kaepernick is not going to be signed into the NFL. Politics or no politics, he's done. He's done. Would a player like Colin Kaepernick be really good right about now? Probably, but it's just not going to happen. Let's be honest. The NFL has black flagged him, and it is what it is. Right. So, but beyond that, who else is out there? And no, Andrew Luck's not coming out of retirement. I mean, no. I tried looking up. I looked up last night the top 50.
Brett Favre. Brett Favre's always ready to go, right?
Tony Romo. I saw a meme after Dak went down yesterday with his injury. Tony Romo. It was a meme of Bernie Sanders coming down an escalator with with a serious look on his face, like, "All right, put me in, coach." And somebody said, "This is Tony Romo when Dak went down." But seriously, I mean, you look at the top 50 available free agents right now in the NFL. There's not a single quarterback there. I mean, who can the Colts go out and sign? And who would be worthy enough for who are you going to go out and try to trade for even and not have to sell the farm?
Right.
I mean, or is it, I mean, if you have a couple more bad games with Phillip Rivers, is it time to go the Jacob Eason route? I don't know. But
or do they go the Jacoby Brissett route? They have Brissett. They don't
Jacoby Brissett route. I don't think they go that route. I think that maybe they try it for a game, and if it fails, but I mean, what you're more likely to see is the Colt. I mean, you're probably not going to see any of this. Let's just be honest. This is what we do.
Yeah.
We talk about these types of things and they don't come to fruition ever. But the more likely thing would be to try to trade for some wide receiver help. You're okay at running back. You're okay at tight end. You're okay at offensive line. And that's not me grading those positions. That's just saying you don't need really help at those positions. The area you need help in is wide receiver. I don't. Everybody's like, man, we were so lucky when we had Peyton Manning and Andrew Luck. Yeah, we were. You're right, we were. But look at the weapons those guys had.
Yeah.
Marvin Harrison, Reggie Wayne, a young T.Y. Hilton,
Dallas
Brandon
Clark.
Stokely, Dallas Clark. Well, no, I'm just looking at wide receivers.
Right.
I mean, Pierre Garcon, Austin Collie, Anthony
Darius Hayward Bay.
Gonzalez. I mean,
I'm joking, but
they had really good weapons.
Yeah.
And right now, the Colts wide receiving room is bare. It is bare, and it's not anything with their fault. I mean, they coming into this season, the wide receiving room looked like it was going to be a strength. T.Y. Hilton, Paris Campbell, Michael Pittman, Desmond Patton. I mean, that was good. Paris Campbell looked like he was going to have a great season until he tore his Achilles. Desmond Patman Michael Pittman was looking really good until his injury issue reared its head, and I forget what it's called, but it's not very good. Like it's one of those things that he's always going to have it, and this could be potential where he could miss several games a season because of it. So
like plantar fasciitis.
No, it's something in his leg where he had to go in and actually have it relieved.
Oh, I was like, that's the only thing I can think of that that does crop up every now and again, because I know
it's something it's something in like his lower leg, I believe. But it's a scary thought because this was a wide receiving room that had a ton of potential. So that's why I think if you're going to make any moves, try to bring in wide receivers. Look at teams like the Lions, but just look at around. I mean, Galladay, would be an option from the Lions. But I mean, just look at around the league and see. I mean, keep your ear to the ground. If I'm Chris Ballard, I'm looking. I mean, there are a few options out there that are serviceable. One of the main options, if you wanted to bring them in at wide receiver, is sitting out there in the open market, Mohamed Sanu. He's 34, but he got cut from the 49ers probably because he's 34, and they had a bunch of younger wide receivers. But he's an option. I mean, there are guys out there, and I think that's the area where the Colts need to look at trying to shore things up and not trying to just patch it over with Band-Aids from the practice squad. I'm sorry, but you're not going to win games with Ashton Doolin and Marcus Johnson as your starting wide receivers. You're just not. So I don't know. Is any of this going to happen? Nope.
But hey,
the Colts will be good enough to get into the playoffs, good enough to get into the playoffs, but not bad enough to get a good draft pick.
Yeah, that's
a lot like the Indiana Pacers.
Right. Hey, you know what? That is a wonderful segue into our next topic, which is our NBA season recap. But before we get there, let's go ahead and remind you guys that if you want to follow us on Twitter, go ahead and go to our Twitter page at Crash Course FM. Crash Course Podcast on YouTube. New Memory Lane coming out on Friday. We're going to take a step away from the Big Ten championships for a minute, and we're going to start getting into it's the baseball season. It's baseball playoffs. ALCS, NLCS getting going, so we're going to relive the Cubs postseason run. So we're going to watch the clinchers for the next 3 weeks. We're going to watch the clinchers from all of those series, the Giants and Dodgers and Indians, en route to the Cubs winning in 2016. So that'll be a lot of fun. And then we also post the podcast if you do miss that as well. And then you remember you can, if you do miss, it's recording live on Facebook, which we're doing right now. So if you're listening to us on the audio version, go make sure you like our Facebook page, Crash Course Podcast, so that way you can watch us live every week. And then remember, you can listen to us weekly on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcasts can be heard. You can hear the Crash Course Podcast. So, let's get into our NBA season recap, which the NBA season concluded just last night. The Lakers do beat the Heat 4-2 in the NBA Finals. The Lakers did win the first 2 games of the series. Jimmy Butler, he scores 40, gets a triple-double in Game 3, which allows the Heat to pull back into it. Game 5 was an incredible game. Jimmy Butler has 35 points, 12 rebounds, 11 assists, a triple-double. LeBron has 40 points and 13 rebounds. The Heat win to make it 3-2 that the Lakers were up. But then the Lakers win last night 106-93 in Game 6 to win the series. My reaction to to the NBA Finals, it was a situation where it started out not so fun because it looked like the Lakers were just going to run away with it. They had run away with their other series in the Western Conference side of things, so it looked like they were going to just kind of run away with the NBA Finals as well. But then it became really fun. Really, once the Heat kind of woke up and got back into the series, it became a really fun series to watch. But it was about what you expected, from this series and from the NBA playoffs. LeBron dominated. He averaged 30 points a game. He was the NBA Finals MVP. Anthony Davis was right behind him with 26 points. But kind of what I learned, and it's what we learned early on in the postseason, and really since the bubble began, is that the Heat are a scary team. I said earlier this year that I kind of wish I had stayed with my Heat prediction to go at least to the NBA, or to at least to not to the NBA Finals. I don't think I was going to have them beat the Celtics or the Bucks, but I kind of wished I had stuck with that pick because of them getting to the Eastern Conference Finals, because they're a very good team, a very scary team. And, if they can add a piece or two via trade or via free agency, I mean, they're going to be kind of up there with the Bucks and the Raptors, as far as, they're going to be up there as far as a team that can, contend for that Eastern Conference crown. I mean, there's some rumors. I've heard rumors that Giannis could possibly be dealt to the Heat. I don't know how really legit those are. But one player that the Heat were trying to get at the trade deadline was Danilo Gallerini. So it's rumored that he's a restricted free agent. That's not a rumor; it's fact. But he's rumored that he would be a good fit for the Heat as well. So if they can add a few more pieces, I mean, this is a Heat team going into next season that's going to be really scary, and that kind of makes you as a Pacers fan kind of grimace because it looked like the heavens were kind of opening up for kind of anybody could win the Eastern Conference. There's no more LeBron. We can it can be literally anyone. It can be the Bucks, the Raptors, the Heat, the Sixers, the Celtics, the Pacers. Well, I mean, if they keep Giannis and they added some more pieces, but they kind of have that Pacers mentality, and we'll get it back to it a little bit later of like not wanting to go too big. And that ends up being kind of their downfall. But, it kind of looked like it was going to be that situation where we'd have, a bunch of different teams. And now, the Heat are starting to crop up again. The Celtics have looked strong. So it looks, as formidable as ever for the Pacers to try to get back into things.
Yeah, I mean, all right, I'll admit it. I did not watch a single game of this NBA Finals. Not because I was boycotting it or anything like that. I just found myself having better things to do.
Right.
I've gotten to a point where I'm tired of LeBron. It's one of those, I respect the fact that he is a really good player, but I don't respect the fact that he whines so much on the court. I know, and it gets old watching. Like for me, everybody knows I'm a huge Red Sox fan, but I enjoyed watching Derek Jeter play because Derek Jeter was a heck of a baseball player. And he was fun to watch. LeBron's just not fun to watch anymore. He just, to me, he isn't. It's the same old. He goes out. He goes out and he plays like this because he can, because he's so much physically stronger than everybody else. And I mean, that part that's great. That's him. There's no argument that he's a great basketball player, but it's just everything else that goes along with LeBron. I get tired of, I guess. Did I keep tabs on the games? Yeah, I kept tabs on the games no matter what. I did. I was curious in that, but I wasn't going to go out of my way to tune in every night. that they played. I mean, I had the game feed or the game cast going on Bleacher Report and following it along like that. But I don't know. I guess I'm ready for the next changing of the guard in the NBA. I guess I'm ready for the Golden State Warriors to be healthy again. Um, but and I think maybe also just the fact playing in a bubble, there was no shift. Like, okay, now they're heading back to Miami, and then the crowd gets into it as well. I think for me, that was probably one of the main reasons. But I don't know. Watching the Pacers was fun just because I'm a Pacers fan, and early on, the storyline behind T.J. Warren playing like he did at the beginning of the bubble, that was fun to follow. Could he keep it up? That type of thing. Or watching the Phoenix Suns go undefeated early on in the bubble, coming out of nowhere, and wanting to pull for them. That was fun. There's things like that was a lot of fun about the bubble. But the biggest thing for me was just no fans. I mean, I know they were there virtually, but it just didn't have the same thing, the same feel to it. And then especially in the playoffs and the finals, they were playing on the same court every single time. There wasn't, I don't know. You kind of felt like, okay, if the lower seeded team or the underdog can steal a game here, they're going back home, and they'll give them some momentum, and they'll have their home base behind them. They can that'd be a good opportunity for them to take a couple more and really maybe try to take command of the series. Without that, there wasn't that kind of intrigue for me around the NBA Finals. And kind of going into it, did I think Miami had a chance? Yeah, I did, because they were so dominant in the going through the East. But then after game one, I was like, okay, that's that. And, did they put up a fight? Yeah, they did. But I feel like game 5 it was game 5. When after Miami won that game, that just took it out of them. I tuned in to check the score in game 6, and it was I think it was the first quarter, and the Heat were up by like 20 some points. Or not the Heat, the Lakers were up by 20 some points. And I was like, yep, there it is. Now, had I gone to a game 7, I probably would have tuned into game 7. But I mean, a lot of times, even in championship elimination games like that, I'll tune in at the very end to see it. And part of me really wanted to tune in because I really, really, really wanted to see Frank Vogel hoist that trophy. I'm so happy for him. So happy for him. And by the way, a former Purdue Boilermaker basketball player also was on that championship team. Not as a player, but as a video coordinator. Drew Anthrop, the Anthrop family, the family of Purdue athletics, is the video coordinator for the LA Lakers. Just like Frank Vogel got his start, and Eric Spoelstra. For those of you who didn't know that, Eric Spoelstra also got his start as a video coordinator. So,
interesting.
Yeah, you don't have to be a great basketball player to become a coach, a championship winning coach in the NBA.
That seems to be like the trend. Like if you weren't very good, like as a player, you become like a manager or a coach or or something like that.
Or even if you were good as a player, they expect you to be a great coach. I think Larry Bird started that trend, truly, and everybody's like, "Well, if it worked for Larry Bird, I mean, it can happen again." And so far,
I will say this: I do see what you're saying, because I didn't. Not that I expected no fans to be, not that I expected there to be no difference, but I definitely see what you're saying as far as there's not that shift in momentum that you're used to seeing. And the problem is that each of these sports, now that they're playing and into into different stages of their season. Of course, the NFL just starting and the NBA's playoffs just concluding, MLB in the middle of their postseason. They're a product of when they started. So, the fact that, so it seems a little odd that you've got the NBA in a bubble, the, Major League Baseball's in a bubble with no fans, but then, in those same areas where they're having, no fans, they're also holding NFL games, some of which have fans. You have
Miami
the
Dolphins having a full or allowing a full stadium.
right. You have you have Florida Gators, you have college football allowing fans in the stands, that kind of thing. So it feels really weird juxtaposed against, that, but it's like I said, it's a product of when they started. So it's a little odd, and I definitely noticed it wasn't as cool to you normally there's big moments in these playoff games, obviously, and you don't hear that erupting of the fans or the stadium goes silent if it goes against their team. So that I did miss, from the postseason, and I think it was interesting to see. I was rooting. I wasn't rooting for LeBron, but I was glad to see the Lakers win. Because of all the things that the Lakers as a organization have been through this season. The death of Kobe Bryant. That was, cool to see them get the win because of that. And I tuned in, and I made sure to tune into the end of Game 6 because I did the same thing you did. I looked at the score. I flipped over. I was watching a little bit of the Rays and the Astros, and then I flip over and saw it was 64-36 at halftime. I was like, I can tune into that here in a little bit. So I went back to the Rays and the Astros.
Speaking of the Rays and the Astros, if there is one team that can play with no fans and play very well with no fans,
it's the Rays.
The Tampa Bay Rays.
They can be successful that way.
Here they are having a really good season, making a run at the World Series potentially, and no fans are allowed, and that doesn't seem to affect them one bit.
Nope. They thrive in these scenarios.
And can we talk about how, the Astros, after the cheating scandal, a series went away from making the World Series?
You don't know how much I'm sweating bullets because I don't want to see them win a World Series ever again. I want their one franchise as a World Series. Now, talk to me again in 5-10 years. I may not feel the same way, but right now I'm I want their one World Series with this core of players to be tainted. That's what I want. I will admit it. I that's how far the hate goes. I want their one World Series title.
If they win the World Series this year,
so
it basically says, who cares if they cheated? They were that good.
Well, and that's the thing. In 2015, the Astros, that's the year the Astros broke onto the scene where Tuve, I don't think Bregman was there yet, but they had a lot of pieces from their current team that were kind of being molded. They had a good team. That's the thing that I think that's the most jaw-dropping about the whole cheating scandal is that they had a good team. They didn't need to cheat, but they chose to cheat. So I think it'd be one thing if I'm not saying there's a good way to cheat and a bad way to cheat, but if you're there was
don't get caught.
Exactly. Well, there's as far as there was a little bit of a rumor before the big news with the Washington football team broke this summer, that there was a possibility that they had paid off the refs. And of course that got immediately shot down and debunked because even one official from the team was look, if we were paying the refs, we should have done a way better job because we
wouldn't have been picking in the top 5.
Right. So if the Washington football team went from being 2-14 every year, and then all of a sudden they're 14-2 with very minimal roster changes, then that's something where I could be all right, you cheated, that sucks, but I can see kind of why you cheated. Whereas the Astros were a good team, and they're you know what? We're so insecure as a franchise that we feel like we need that extra edge to put us over the top because we have to win a World Series with this core of players because, we have to make the tanking, legitimate, basically. So, yeah, I am please do not let the Astros make the World Series. If they get to the World Series, okay, the only way I'd be okay with the Astros getting to the World Series is if they're playing the Dodgers, and then please let the Dodgers win. Take redemption. It comes full circle. All right, then, because that's the crazy thing, and I don't mean to be 40 minutes into the podcast, and we haven't talked about the Pacers but a handful of times, but the thing is that I lost my train of thought. That's what just happened just then. My brain was nope, Pacers, you're at 40 minutes. But if I remember it, I will come back to it. But yeah, let's go ahead. I'll try to, I'm going to give myself an ad break to try to remember what I was talking about. So we're going to get to these ads real quick, and then we'll be back to talk about the Pacers or remember what my point was. The Crash Course Podcast is brought to you by Anchor. Looking to start a podcast but don't know where to start? Look no further than Anchor.fm. Anchor allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your computer or mobile device and will distribute it to other sites such as Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. On a budget, not only is Anchor completely free of charge, but will allow you to make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor.fm to get started. Anchor, it's everything you need in a podcast in one place. Even though this is a presidential election, there are many more candidates on the ballot. Ballot Ready is a nonpartisan guide to your entire ballot where you can compare candidates based on stances, biography, or endorsements. From there, you can save your choices to use when you vote by mail or in the voting booth. You can even request your absentee ballot or make a plan to vote early. This year, with changes to polling places and vote by mail laws as a result of COVID, it's more important than ever to have a plan to vote. This election matters. Make sure you have a plan to make an informed vote. Go to ballotready.org and enter your address to make a plan to vote today. All right, I knew I would remember it if I gave myself a little bit of time. Basically, what I was gonna say though is that like the Astros is the crazy thing about the Astros is that they have, you know, going into this season, they were supposed to they were supposed to hear the booing of the fans. There was going to be a couple of players that went renegade and hit them. There was going to be, you know, they were basically, right.
Joe Kelly.
Right. So Joe Kelly was the kind of saving grace of that whole movement. But they were supposed to face their retribution this year. It doesn't happen because of no fans. Then they decide, like, you know what? Even though we're the ones that cheated, we cheated the system, instead of just saying, hey, we're sorry, we didn't, whatever, and they could just kind of have a redemption arc of their own. That way, they decide, hey, you know what we're going to do? We're going to embrace the villain role and play the victim. Like, you guys have been mean to us all year because you guys had the audacity to, you know, say that our title that we cheated to get isn't legitimate. And then, you know, they've kind of played themselves up as, like, us against the world, which, I mean, I guess theoretically it is them against the world, but at the same time, like, it's their own fault that it's like that. And so it would be nothing better than for that whole, like, story arc, that redemption arc to end with the Dodgers who, you know, where this all began, the Dodgers to beat the Astros. So, you know what? I want the Dodgers. I'm kind of pulling for the Dodgers of the four teams that are left anyway, but that's the only way that I would be okay with the Astros coming back from a 2-0 deficit and winning the ALCS. But I don't want to make that gamble, so I really hope it's Dodgers Rays. So
hey, I'm pulling for the Rays because why not?
I mean, yeah, I mean that will be a fun story.
But seriously, the Rays are good every few years, and I don't know. Anybody but the Yankees is what I always say. Hey. Anybody but the Yankees, and the Yankees are out.
Yeah.
But our show tonight is about the Pacers and the upcoming offseason and how crazy it's going to be. I mean,
yeah. What
are they going to do?
Right. So, I mean, you know, it's okay to get to the main topic 45 minutes in, right? It's fine. It's all good. No. I mean,
if anybody has an issue with that on Facebook Live, speak now or forever hold your peace. Go ahead. That's what the chat is for.
Yeah, that is.
Comment away.
Yeah, comment away. Let us know what you think. But yeah, so the Pacers come into kind of a weird offseason because there's already been rumors swirling around that Oladipo might want out of Indianapolis. Depot has refuted those rumors, but I mean, you never know. You know, it's kind of,
what was he gonna do? Confirm them?
Right, exactly. So you kind of take that with a grain of salt. Nate McMillan was fired just 2 weeks after signing an extension. You know, that was kind of met with mixed reviews. I think it was time. You know, it wasn't working out. And they just weren't taking that next step. And literally sweeps the last 2 seasons. Understandably so. 1 year it was without Oladipo. The next year was without Sabonis, but still not getting it done. And then they have no first round picks this year, and they don't have a lot of cap space. So, you know, normally this time of year we're talking about who can they maybe go get, and it's kind of a weird spot for them to be on. You know, my thoughts, you know, like I said, I think it was time to move on from Nate McMillan. He hadn't been getting it done. It kind of seemed like there were some spots where, you know, he wasn't, you know, kind of pushing the right buttons. aspirations to at least be in the upper echelon of the Eastern Conference, if not contending for the Eastern Conference. It's a little, it's a little, kind of. You're not really that excited with what he's been able to do because he hasn't been able to do much. He hasn't been pushing those buttons that you'd like to see him be able to push. So yeah, it's a little frustrating. That they haven't been able to really take that next step, and it's not been great on his end of things. And then as far as Victor Oladipo goes, I mean, I've seen some rumors about where he could potentially go. I've seen, some things like that, where he could potentially be traded to. But I think, as much as I love Victor Oladipo, on multiple levels, I loved him on The Masked Singer. I love him as an Indiana Pacer. I love me some Victor Oladipo, but he needs to realize that this is really one of the few teams in the NBA where he will be the guy. And actually be in a good situation to at least contend or win every season. Sure, he can go to the Knicks and be the guy. He can go to the Kings and be the guy. But he's not going to be in the same situation he's in with the Pacers. And I mean, maybe he doesn't want to be in this situation with the Pacers, but if he wants to win, and wants to win, sooner rather than later, I mean, because the thing is, too, is that I don't want to be one of those people on Twitter or on social media that are like, yeah, you know what? Victor Oladipo had one good season. He's trash, whatever. But he had that great first season, then the season with the injury where he was still having a good year, and then this year where he's recovered from the injury. He's been with the Pacers three seasons now, two of which have been recovering from an injury or, without him due to injury, and one was that great breakout season. So, I mean, not to downplay that, but that's not enough, in my opinion, to be like, yep, I could carry a franchise. I think he can. He's got a lot of good guys around him here in Indiana, which is why I think it'd be kind of a wrong move to abandon that. Now, there's also rumors that, the Mavericks could be looking at him, but they're in the West, so that may be kind of a little bit, he may just get buried, in the West. And then the one team that does scare me that, I've heard rumored to get him is the Raptors, just because that is a winning franchise, and they do have a solid core there as well. So that would be a team that I would be worried about getting Oladipo. But I mean, the fact of the matter is, as much as I love Victor Oladipo, he's not going to carry a franchise by himself. And even if he is the face of a franchise, it's not going to be a franchise with a winning pedigree. He will be kind of the name on the marquee if he goes to Toronto, but even then, he's not going to be the guy because there's other guys there as well that are kind of on that same level of superstar. So, I don't want to see Oladipo go, but that's just kind of where I'm at as far as like his impact to the NBA. Now, his impact to the Pacers is fantastic, and I hope he doesn't go, like I said. But, in the whole scope of the NBA, I don't think he can expect to go to, another franchise, like the Kings, like the Knicks, and expect to be both the guy and also win basketball games and be in contention to win the East.
All right. So the Nate McMillan firing, I think, was the right move. It was time to move on. I know everybody's like, Mike D'Antoni, Mike D'Antoni, Mike D'Antoni. You know how many times Mike D'Antoni's been rumored to the Pacers? Every time they have a head coach vacancy? Every time. It just hasn't happened. For me, the two that I'm down to the most, I mean, if Mike D'Antoni happens, okay, great. We'll see how it goes. Not thrilled. The two that I would love to see, and no, not Mark Jackson, I want either Chauncey Billups, because in my mind, Chauncey Billups, I mean, he's one of those guys that was a good basketball player, but he was like a coach on the courts. Let's be honest, he was. That's what made him so good. The other one, Becky Hammonds. I know, who's going to make that move and hire the first female head coach? Why not? I mean, she was a heck of a basketball player, a great basketball mind, and she's been learning coaching techniques and everything under Greg Popovich. I mean, it's kind of like the Bill Belichick coaching tree there almost, Think about it. A Greg Popovich student, essentially. I think those two are the two that I would want the most, and I feel like would be the best to move the Pacers in the right direction. Um, as far as the Victor Oladipo thing goes, I haven't heard too much about those teams that you mentioned. The teams that I've heard the most noise from that would look at moving for him. One of the most notable teams I say I've heard is the Minnesota Timberwolves. Uh, Basically putting together a trade package for Victor Oladipo, and that would also include, I believe it's the number one overall pick. Yeah, number one overall pick, which wouldn't be a bad thing whatsoever. Victor Oladipo would be basically teaming up then with D'Angelo Russell and Karl Anthony Towns, so he wouldn't have to be that go-to guy. He would be that kind of missing piece potentially. Another move that I've heard is sending him to Houston, and I believe Myles Turner was included in that as well. I think I sent this one to you.
Yeah.
Where they get Russell Westbrook in return. Not thrilled about that one because Russell Westbrook is not. I don't think he's the player you want to build your team around to try to get through the playoffs.
Russell Westbrook has. I mean, yes, he is. As good as far as assists goes, but he is very. I don't know, but yeah, I don't know how much.
He can't shoot.
Right. Yeah. So I was like, I don't know. I mean, obviously he's a great player, but he
does not play defense.
Right. So I was like, there's a lot of me, I think, that would be involved with Russell Westbrook.
He wouldn't fit in Indiana.
No. Which as much as we'd like to be, as much as we like to throw out big names, I mean to find a big name that's actually rumored and be like, nah, that's not like the podcast to do that. But at the same time, it's not going to be a good fit at all.
However, there has been a lot of rumor, a lot of smoke with this potential deal that would include Victor Oladipo and Myles Turner, and to a team that has been connected to Myles Turner a lot here recently. That is the Boston Celtics. I know, like, oh, come on, you're going to trade two of your best players to a team that's near the top of the conference? Yeah, but hear me out. One, unless you're a fan of like the Lakers or the 76ers, not many people out that it's hard to root against the Boston Celtics, for one, because of Brad Stevens. He's just that type of guy. Two, this would be a great move for both teams. The move, I'm going to say here, make a few tweaks to it potentially, but the trade package would be the Indiana Pacers send Victor Oladipo and Myles Turner to the Boston Celtics for Gordon Hayward, Marcus Smart, Robert Williams, the 14th pick, and the 20th pick, both of them being in the first round. That would essentially give the Boston Celtics the super team that they are looking for, a team with Myles Turner, Jason Tatum, Marcus Brown, Kemba Walker, and Victor Oladipo. That is going to be one of the best starting five in the entire Eastern Conference, potentially the NBA. That gives the Celtics the center that they've been looking for, that can stretch the floor, that can protect the rim. And it's a great move for them. Victor Oladipo would give them an extra scoring punch, an added defensive presence. Victor Oladipo is a very good defensive player. A lot of people sleep on that fact. What the Pacers would get in return with Gordon Hayward, Marcus Smart, Robert Williams, the 14th pick and the 20th pick, one, it moves you into the first round twice. So that then gives you a little bit of flexibility if you want to trade some of those picks away for some other players, package them with like whatever you need to do to get this team so it's not a rebuild you're going into. But it'd be smart on there. And also, by the way, you'd be like, man, that's a lot for the Celtics to give up. Celtics do not have the cap space or the roster space for all the picks that they have this year. They have to unload these picks. And this would be a good way for them to really build their team and get what they actually need. And then you may be saying, well, Gordon Hayward he's been injured a lot. This is home for Gordon Hayward. He just bought a new multi-million-dollar mansion in Fishers, so he still lives here. And maybe the change of scenery, back in his hometown where he's not constantly away from family, anything like that, may give him more of a relaxed approach. And help him return to that all-star form. Marcus Smart would pick up the defensive pressure that you lose from both Myles Turner and, well, mostly from Victor Oladipo. And then Robert Williams is a great, it would be a really good backup to Sabonis, or put him in as a backup at the power forward position. So this would then give the Pacers essentially, I mean, obviously you can draft 2 young players if you want, or use those picks to bring in some other veterans, whatever it may be. But the starting 5 for the Indiana Pacers would then look like Malcolm Brogdon at starting point guard, Marcus Smart starting at the 2, Gordon Hayward starting at the 3. TJ Warren would then get moved to the position that he is more comfortable at, which is the power forward position, and be a stretch power forward for sure. I mean, that would be a defense. It'd be a nightmare for opposing defenses to have their 4 stretched out like that against him. And then Sabonis would be your starting 5, moving him from the power forward position that he was at previously, or whatever their lineup has been with Sabonis and Turner out on the court at the same time. And Robert Williams being one of your first players off the bench, because let's be honest, Goga did not leave us all super inspired about him being the backup 5. Robert Williams could either back up at the 4 or the 5, whatever you need him to do. And heck, if you don't really want Robert Williams, if you're okay with Goga and seeing how he continues to grow, or what you can get in the draft, instead of Robert Williams, maybe look at a player like a Carson Edwards that could be one of those first players off the bench, second player off the bench to provide a scoring punch. Maybe for him, getting out of a log-jammed position may help him excel his career. I feel like,
hey, B. Scott, where did Carson Edwards go to college? Do you know?
Oh, it was some Big Ten school.
Okay, I got you.
I'm just saying, like a player players like him and Romeo Langford are kind of stuck in a logjam.
Yeah.
In Boston right now, and they're not getting to see the court that much. I mean, Romeo Langford's been talked about in other trade packages just because he wants to be able to see the court. That makes sense. But even if you just keep Robert Williams in this trade, it's a great start for the Pacers. It puts the Celtics where they want to be. The Pacers probably could be even bigger time contenders with this lineup. And I mean, heck, that would put a lot of butts in the seats. That's a really good starting 5. It really is. And then obviously you're going to get Jeremy Lamb back eventually from his injury. Or if you want to, you can package him with a draft pick, or Doug McDermott with a draft pick, and get another veteran player. I mean, there's a lot of options. Even though the Pacers don't have much cap space, by trading Oladipo and Turner, that frees up some stuff, and it brings in some other assets. I think this is the move that benefits both teams, and both teams would be happy to see each other get benefited by it. Because, I mean, I don't know. This is one. I know it would hurt to lose 2 of your better players, but what you would get in return, I feel like would put the Pacers in a better position than they are in currently.
Well, and I think too is that it's not like you're trading your 2 best players that are happy and in their prime. And
Myles Turner's happy.
Well, right. But I mean, one is one and one is the other. So like you've got one player that's maybe a little gruntled. And then you've also got, or disgruntled, you've got another player that is, kind of been right on that precipice of being, even better, and just hasn't quite gotten to that point yet. And it's been a few years now. And so that's why I think, like, it's not as if, it's the Rockets saying, you know what we want to do today? Let's trade James Harden and Russell Westbrook. It's not that. It's more or less, hey, we're going to trade, 2 players that have a lot of potential, have a lot of tradability, are very good players to get, what better fits our team. So I think that's where that trade really kind of pans out, is that's what it kind of has to be looked at, is because right now I think, honestly, the one player on this roster that I'm like, I'm confident that he will be a Pacer for a long time, and I think the team can really build around, is Sabonis. That's the player.
I would even say TJ Warren.
Right, but I mean, I guess of the players that have been kind of rumored in those trade talks, between Turner and Sabonis and Oladipo, Oladipo and Turner, I think, are kind of the biggest wild cards, and then you've got Sabonis, who I think is pretty entrenched with the Pacers as well.
The best rumor, and that's not even a rumor. I think this is just one somebody just swung for the fences just because they could and they needed clickbait. Victor Oladipo to the Los Angeles, and I think Jeremy Lamb and Doug McDermott to the Los Angeles Clippers for Paul George.
You know what?
What? That would be the biggest middle finger to Paul George ever.
That's the only reason I want that trade back is to be like it is
Paul George, double barrel salute to you.
And you know what? We are going to talk about Paul George here in the next segment. But I also want to bring up the fact that hey, all you people out there that are like, hey, you know what? The Clippers are what the Pacers could have been. They could have had Kawhi. They could have had Paul George. Guess what? They watched the NBA.
Dumpster fire?
They watched the same NBA finals that we did from their couches. So
hey, Greg, you remember that question you asked me earlier about where Carson Edwards went to school?
Yeah.
You want to stand up and show everybody your sweatshirt?
Oh yeah. Did you see it? Yeah, it's Purdue. But yeah, let's go ahead and transition now into hot or cold. And so we've got 3 questions on the docket, and it's going to kind of wrap up, this NBA season. And so first question is, the NBA bubble experiment was a success. I think that's a hot take. I think it went according to plan. There wasn't really any issues. There was a couple of flare-ups here and there, but not of the virus, just people breaking quarantine. There was.
You got to go to the strip club. You got to go to the strip club. That's all
I mean, yeah. What was it? Didn't somebody get like DoorDash and they like opened the door for their DoorDash guy and like that was like an issue at one point? That was like earlier on in the summer when they were like just getting into the bubble.
Or when you got to sneak in that Instagram model. I mean.
Yeah, it was.
Do it for the gram, baby. Do it for the gram.
I do like that. Like halfway through the bubble, that's when they were getting mad about like family not being allowed. Like I understand they're not robots; they need to see their family. I'm not arguing against that. What I'm saying is you do understand what a bubble is, correct? Like you can't just keep being like, all right, let's get these whole new because it's easier to kind of keep tabs on a team when you start bringing other variables in it, like family and that kind of thing. That's
family. The most heartwarming moment of the entire NBA bubble was when Jason Tatum's his son showed up.
True.
That was probably the best video that has come out of the entire NBA bubble. If you haven't seen it, Google it, whatever you got to do. Just, pure happiness. Gotta love it.
And now there was worries going into the bubble as well about it taking away from social injustice. In my opinion, now I've said, in arguments and stuff with, with other people and on, different social media apps that I'm not one to, say anything, based on, I'm not one to kind of step in if someone says they're offended by something, someone says it's an issue that they have and it's not necessarily my issue. I'm not one to say, hey, you shouldn't be mad about that. But in my opinion, I think the fact that the Bucks and Magic in a playoff series were willing to boycott a game because of that cause, the social injustice causes, I think that was kind of proved that like, hey, you know what, we can still have this bubble, we can still return to play, and then we can also like still keep the issues at the forefront. I think that kind of and those cancellations through that like whole like couple of days across all sports, really all sports took part in that as well. And then I do feel confident that the NBA can appropriately handle a non-bubble season, because if next season does happen, I think the only way it can happen is to have it outside of a bubble. You're not going to lock people in a bubble for 6 months. I guess theoretically they did it for 4, but they, you're not going to be able to have an entire NBA season, in a bubble. So I think that, this is a league that has shown you they can do it, but at this point, when the NBA does restart, whether it be in December, whether it be in January, whenever they do decide to start their next season, I think it will be, it'll also be after the NFL has, gone through what they're going through, college football, MLB, that kind of thing. So they'll kind of have a little bit more of an idea of what they can do as a, as a sport as far as testing and stuff goes. And they're much like baseball in the sense that it's a lot easier to postpone games, move games back, that kind of thing. So I am excited to see how they can handle it. So yeah, I think on the whole, the bubble was a success. It did what it was supposed to do. There was not a whole lot of issues, and the NBA, I may not be as big of a fan of the NBA as I am Major League Baseball or the NFL, but I do have to say that like Adam Silver is by far the best commissioner in sports right now, and they did a great job with the bubble.
Yeah, I agree. This is definitely a hot take. The bubble accomplished what it was set there to do, which was complete the NBA season and help us crown a champion. It did. And you're right. Adam Silver, I think, is probably the best commissioner in all of sports because his players don't hate him.
Very true.
I don't know how the owners feel, but the players don't hate him, which is that's a big deal because the players hate Roger Goodell and the NFL, and obviously we saw what happened in Major League Baseball.
Rob Manfred hates baseball, and baseball hates Rob Manfred. That's pretty much sums that up.
But yeah, it was definitely a hot take, and I know the ratings for the NBA were way down when they came back into the bubble, but I don't think it had anything to do with the bubble. It had other thing. It had other reasons behind it, but it wasn't because of the bubble. So, yeah, why not? I know, honestly, it created a blueprint for a lot of other leagues to look at, a lot of other sports to look at on how to handle a situation like if they needed to go into a bubble. I mean, in the NCAA, a lot of teams and conferences are looking at the potential bubble route or like, non-conference scheduling, looking at bubble route as well. And I mean, there's just a lot of people are looking towards the NBA and using that blueprint to figure out how to successfully put on a season or complete a season.
So question number 2, the Pacers should make a trade this offseason. We all kind of got into this a little bit already. That's a hot take for me. My trade idea is not as elaborate as that one you talked about earlier, although I do like the one we talked about with the Celtics and the Pacers. But I have said, and I said earlier this offseason, that the Pacers should trade Myles Turner at least, because I think what they get back in that trade package, is going to be or should be draft capital. There are a lot of teams that have multiple picks, like the Celtics. Maybe the 76ers have 5 picks throughout the whole draft. You're not saying that that's a trade that'll happen. You mentioned the Timberwolves. That's also another possibility. I mean, the Warriors have the 2nd pick and the 48th pick, so I mean, you could possibly do something there. There's not a whole lot the Warriors need, but I mean, those are just me.
Warriors could actually use a Myles Turner,
right? So I mean, there's some definite possibilities there, but it's for the reasons that I've spoke about earlier, where it's more of a situation with Myles Turner where he's reached, he's a good player, but he has not reached his full potential. So now maybe, after years of kind of trying to get things figured out, it may just not be the right fit. So maybe you trade him away, get some draft capital back, work your way back into things. So I do think that that's a possibility. You do want to stick with Sabonis because, like I said, I think he's the most entrenched on the roster. And then, yeah, if the relationship with Victor Oladipo and the Pacers looks bleak, I'm all for trading him away, because as much as I love Victor Oladipo, I mean, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and it's kind of at the end of the day, it's a business. You don't hate Victor Oladipo for it, as long as he doesn't do the same thing that Paul George did and say, hey, you know what, I went out and I'm going to say that with a year left on my contract, and good luck trading me. So as long as it's not like one of those deals, if it's not going to work out, it's not going to work out, and now may be the time to trade him.
Yeah, I think this is a hot take as well. The Pacers definitely, I mean, it's the only way they're going to get the roster that they want is to make trades. And we've talked about it. The 2 biggest trade assets that they have are Victor Oladipo and Myles Turner. I mean, yeah, there's some starting caliber players that you can throw into a trade package if you need to. But I honestly think you need to trade both. I'll get into a little bit more in our next question as to why Victor Oladipo. But I definitely feel like Myles Turner, because you can't have 2 starting caliber centers on your team and expect both of them to be happy. And let's be honest, the player that's showing the most improvement and gets better year after year so far is Sabonis. I mean, he was an all-star this year. And I mean, he's a double machine. He doesn't disappear. He is probably one of the more physical players in the NBA, even. So I think it's time to move on from Turner, not because he's a bad player, but because it's time for him to get put into a better situation for him. A change of scenery may help him take that next step. And I do think it's time to move on from Victor Oladipo because I do feel like the writing is on the wall and he's not going to re-sign with the Pacers. I'll get a little bit more into that in our next question, but it is not because he doesn't want to be here in Indy. So I'll kind of leave it at that.
Wait, that just leads us right into our last question, and that is if Oladipo leaves, Paul George was right about the Pacers' willingness to win. Now, if you missed it, we did basically a podcast about this earlier on in the summer. But Paul George went on Bleacher Report, basically said that the Pacers don't want to win. That's why he didn't stick around. He said he had basically the best power forward. Conveniently, did not name names. So that's always kind of something I go back to. And then I still contend that that the Pacers probably within reason were like willing to listen, and then he was like, hey, I have this big name that's gonna basically break the bank. The Pacers said we're not about that. So and I think it is a cool take to say that Paul George would be right if another a superstar potential player like Oladipo does leave, because unfortunately that is the mindset of the NBA, is that you're only successful if you have a super team or if you go to a big market. It is a players' league, not that it shouldn't be, but it is a players' league, and players seem to think that they have a better shot of winning if they go to a city with more kind of buzz and hype, like a New York or a LA, than they do,
or like a Brooklyn. Let's be honest,
Brooklyn. Yeah, or Brooklyn. Yeah, so they think that if they go there, that's what's going to be the right move for them. Aside from going to a place like like the Indiana Pacers, even there's been teams even recently that have been smaller market teams that have been successful. I mean, Toronto, Milwaukee, Oklahoma City back in the day. The Pacers even have shown, multiple times, when they did have Paul George. Cleveland. So, these smaller market teams have been successful, and we've even seen one win a championship with the Toronto Raptors a couple of years ago. So, Cleveland, yeah. So,
we all think Cleveland. We don't think Cleveland because LeBron, Kyrie, and Kevin Love all played there.
Right.
But they broke the bank.
Right. That. Yeah. Exactly. And we saw that in the late stages there,
They're still paying for it.
Where LeBron literally didn't have anybody around him. We kind of saw that at the end of his time there in Cleveland. But yeah, it's a situation where people have the league has that mindset, and until that mindset changes, players will be like, well, yeah, the Pacers are a good stepping stone, but the only way I can kind of get my name out there is if I go to a New York and that kind of thing, or a Brooklyn or an LA. And the Pacers aren't willing to break the bank for one player, and it's a move that, while it might be frustrating at times when they have the cap space and they can go out and get, I remember when all the rumors and kind of, hype for a couple of days was about, when Kevin Durant visited Indy, it can look a little bleak sometimes when they're not willing to do that, but it's kind of like watching the Colts operate, where the Colts have been like, hey, you know what? We're not going to, make our team successful or not successful based on one player. And that's kind of how the Pacers have looked at it too, where they're like, you know what, we're not going to make, we're not going to put all of our eggs in one basket and then basically put nothing else around them and hope that it does well. They want to build a team, and if it's not in the cards for them as far as getting a big name player that wants a lot of money, they're not going to do that. And I'm in no way against Victor Oladipo. If he wants out, he doesn't think he's getting paid enough, that kind of thing. Fine. You know what? I'm always for a player going out and seeking a new contract, seeking a better financial situation, because at the end of the day, these players only have a certain amount of time to make the money that they're making, and they have to make it last their whole rest of their lives. So, but at the same time, like I said, it's a situation where I think the Pacers are just a team that doesn't want to break the bank for one player, and because it's a players' league, and because these bigger cities have more capital to kind of throw around, that's why they flock to those areas instead of going to a place where they can actually succeed with more of a team around them. I also think too that there's been a lot of obstacles. For instance, when Paul George was here, with the Pacers, LeBron was in his way. And so there wasn't really too much, even on a good year, there wasn't a whole lot getting past, LeBron, Wade, and Bosh, or getting past, LeBron, Love, Kyle Korver, Kyrie Irving, those great teams that Cleveland had. So there wasn't a whole lot of getting around that, and then now I think the Pacers, they've had 3 years of Oladipo, and I think they've done right by Victor Oladipo. They've like I said, it was the one fantastic year that was right after the trade, and everything was looking really good, and then you have the year with the injury and the year recovering from the injury. There's not been a single time, where during that time I've been like, you know what, they're not putting enough, they're not trying hard enough to appease Victor Oladipo. I've never once thought that this entire time. Have there been times where I'm like, yeah, it'd be cool if they went to go get a Kemba Walker, if they went to go get, a Klay Thompson, would it be cool to go, get one of those guys? Absolutely. But at the same time, I don't think the Pacers have been like, yeah, we could put more talent. We can afford more talent to go around Victor Oladipo, but if he can't do it himself, we don't want him here. That's definitely not the mindset. And so I think overall the Pacers, if Victor Oladipo leaves, I will not look at the Pacers organization and say they didn't do enough, because I think they've done, an outstanding job of what they've done with their time with Victor Oladipo.
I agree. This is a cold take. The situations do not compare whatsoever. If Victor Oladipo gets traded, honestly, I don't see him just walking away from the Pacers. They're going to get something for him. I mean, that's just what they can do. But he's not going to leave because he wants to go to a bigger market, or he doesn't think the Pacers are doing enough. It's going to be because he thinks he's worth more money than the Pacers think he's worth. And that's honestly what it is. He's looking for superstar money. Pacers are like, you got to prove it more so, and we're not willing to spend that kind of money on somebody that hasn't proven it yet. But honestly, I think the Pacers have done a lot to put players around them. Yeah, they haven't gone out and broken the bank by bringing in a Klay Thompson or these big marquee names, but I think the fact that this past offseason really proved that the Pacers are willing to do what it takes to put together a winning team. Not a winning super team like of 3 players and a bunch of ring chasers behind them that follow that, LeBron's posse, essentially, J.R. Smith and all those guys that will follow him from team to team to team and help him win championships. You're not going to get those types of players in Indiana, or you're also not going to get those big time superstars. So what the Pacers have done is they've built a team. I mean, going out and trading your future first round pick and signing him to a big contract with Malcolm Brogdon, that's a big move. That was a big move that people overlook. And then the fact that basically the Pacers robbed the Phoenix Suns blind for TJ Warren, that was another huge move. I mean, going out then and signing Jeremy Lamb, another big move. These are the moves that aren't going to be super team type moves, but these are moves that are going to help you get to that championship contending level. Now, obviously, the Pacers got swept in the first round, but when you're missing your starting all-star center, that's a big deal. But the coach, the kind of old school coach, to be honest, Nate McMillan, nice guy, great, players like him and everything, but his coaching philosophy just doesn't mesh very well into the current day NBA. This is a team that they're doing what they need to do for what they are willing to do, and I think they're building a team that is fully capable of winning a lot of games and being a contender in the East yet again. But do I think Victor Oladipo is going to be a part of that in the future? No, I don't, not because Victor Oladipo doesn't want to be here, and not because the Pacers don't want to win, but because they're not going to be able to agree upon his worth, to be honest. And that's just the way it is. He wants more money. He wants superstar money. Pacers don't want to give him superstar money because he hasn't proven that yet. And, I mean, let's be honest, he hasn't. He really hasn't. You just mentioned it there. He had that one good season post-trade, the injury season, and then the recovery season. They need to see that he's fully back to post-trade level of playing. And I don't think they're willing to wait on that and then have him potentially bolt to go somewhere else. And I'm okay with that. I am okay with that. If it can net a like that trade we talked about with the Celtics, I feel like that is a trade that sets the Pacers up to be contenders in the East long term. I may be wrong, but I think that's a great move. I think it's a great trade.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you, and I mean, I agree with everything you said as well. Like, you know, if they can make that move and they can get it done, I mean, it's a good trade. It'll help pay off, and yeah, I mean, if Victor Oladipo isn't happy, I mean, fine, go be happy somewhere else. I wish you all the best, and that's just how it works sometimes.
Yeah, it is, and you know, if they trade him to a market that is willing to pay him more, that's a perfect fit for him. You know, I don't know. I loved I think we all fell in love with Victor Oladipo when we all got so surprised of how well him and Sabonis played after we all thought.
Well, I mean, look at what
Paul George for them was like.
Look at what the bar was. The bar was literally when his name popped up as that was the trade. Like, the literal first thought I had was like that was just to put butts in the seats because they know IU fans are gonna flock to go see Victor Oladipo, and that's literally the only reason. And then he comes out and plays really well, and basically makes you think like, oh hey, Paul George who? We got Victor Oladipo? Like, let's go. And so the bar was so low, and the ascent to being where they are now was so quick and so great that like it's been crazy. But yeah, I mean, when you really boil it down, it's like we've said a couple times already. It's been one good season and two that have been solid, but you just don't know, and you don't want to sit there and wait on, because I mean that's the thing too. I think a lot of fans don't realize that you're gonna be mad at the Pacers anyway if he does bolt anyway, and they didn't get anything for him when they could have.
Right. I'd rather get something for him now and part on terms saying, hey, we wish you luck in the future. It's just we can't come to terms on the level of salary, to be honest. Yeah. And that's nothing. That has nothing to do with the Pacers' willingness to win. That's business.
Yeah.
If you're in sales, you had one good year, you came back, and next year, and we're sick a lot and just kind of had a down year, and then you started to rebound your third year there, and then you went into your boss's office and asked for a raise. It's going to be, okay, prove that you can go back, you can get back to where you were in year one. You're not going to get a raise just because you had one solid year out of three.
Right.
Even if you were sick with COVID. I don't know. It's trying to put it into real life model that people can understand, but it's not like I said, it's not the Pacers' willingness to win or not to win or whatever. It comes down to business and looking at what the Pacers think he's worth and what he thinks he's worth.
Absolutely. Well, that will do it for this week's edition of the Crash Course Podcast. Thank you guys all for tuning in. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter at Crash Course FM. You can like us on Facebook, Crash Course Podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel where you can see the video version of the podcast if you don't catch us live, as well as a new episode of Memory Lane coming out on Friday, so you won't want to miss that. Also, you can listen to us weekly on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcasts can be heard. You can hear the Crash Course Podcast. Next week, believe it or not, we will be previewing the Big Ten football season. It'll be our third college football preview of the fall, so I'm excited for that. We'll be able to talk a little bit about what's going on in the rest of the college football world as well. So really excited to get into that. But until then, have a good week, everybody.